Everyone, welcome back to a new video. So this is the introduction for it. I've already been through and recorded the whole thing, but I didn't really have a plan while I was doing that. So what I want to show you is what we actually come up with, or what I show you how to build, and that is going through materials, material instances, and dynamic material instances. So you can have blueprint code, or just code in general, drive a material to have cool effects. In this case, I show you how to set up this effect here. So over time, we actually cause damage to the player, and then it shrinks in from the side of the screen, and I can see that in the headset and in front of the hands. So it looks like it's on the screen, and you've got full control over that while having it kind of update and do this cool snazzy effect on the sides, doing some well positioned noise, and then going in and actually hooking all that up. So we do quite a lot. It's going to be a long video. So if you're Patreon or YouTube members, you'll be able to download the entire project now as part of the mega thank you tiers and above. So keep that in mind, and big thank you to everyone over on Patreon and YouTube members who make it possible for me to do videos like this. If you've got any questions, make sure to head over to Discord. Cover materials, material instances, and material dynamic material instances. Yeah. All right. Bye. Welcome back to another video. It's been a little while. Life's been absolutely nuts. But what I'm going to do is show you how to work with material or dynamic material instances. So you can use them in your project, whether it's a VR project or a normal 2D project. They're super powerful, and you can do a lot with them to do different things. I don't have much of a plan in mind of what we're going to go for, but we're going to go through dynamic material instances and then show you how to set those up so we could do some different things with them. Cool. So I'm going to go to materials folder, and we're going to create a new material. So if you don't know what a dynamic material instance is, it is a way that we can tell blueprints to change something in a material from a material instance. Basically, that's exactly it. We want blueprint code to modify our material in some way. And think of this as the old Bioshock games. When you use the serums and it affects the materials on your hand, or the look of your hand, that would probably be a dynamic material instance. You would blend from one material to another material, and then you would have it display that effect. Or you could have maybe a HUD material, so a plane in VR, which is attached to the camera, which then when you take damage, it kind of fades incrementally to red, so you can kind of see what's going on. Or you could just have it so you change the color and do something specific that way. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder just to keep this neat, so when it goes up on Patreon, everybody can check it out. So material, dynamic material instance, and in here we're going to create a new material. So m_dynamic material, and then so the goal with this is to set it up the same way we would with a material instance. So if you don't know what a material instance is, every material, if you give it variables and values, what you can do is you can right click on that material, and then you can create a material instance. So if I bring this in, and then we add a color, so let's say we plug this base color in here, and then we have a value for, so maybe let's just stick with the color for now. So we have this color. If we want to create a new material, what you would probably do is you just save, and then let's say we bring this onto the wall, but we want this wall to have a different color. It would probably, if you're just starting out, duplicate this material, open it up, and then you would change it in here, so you then have different versions. So now we've got a second material, which is and once this finishes compiling, we can then drag this on. However, this isn't really the best workflow. You're increasing draw calls. You kind of want to make sure you're reusing content where possible. And to do that, one of the things you can do is create a material instance. So I'm going to reset this wall, and then we'll go back to this material. And to do that, a material instance is pretty simple to create. All you've got to do is right click and convert to parameter. So now we convert this to a parameter, we can call this color. And now when we hit apply, we have a color parameter. So if we go back to our content browser and we create a material instance from it now, so create a material instance, we can open this up, and you'll see that we now actually get our material on the screen, but we also get a global vector parameter values. If we do the drop down, you can actually see that we have a color variable, which is what we've created. And then we can actually change this however we want. So this material can now be changed to whatever value we need. And then if we modify anything inside of this material, the master essentially, we can go, let's plug this into roughness. So it should make it really shiny. There we go. And then we could right click, convert to parameter, roughness. And then when we go in there, we can see that change has been made. But we can actually take that material instance and we can put it on the other wall. So we've got one material technically, but we've got ways to change that material and do different things. So here, if I go in there now and change a parameter, so global scale would do roughness and then the color, you'll see that we have the main material, which is our master, but we can change these settings, as I've said, and then they can be different from the parent enough that we don't actually have to worry about it. So it's a way of reusing content we've already created. But the benefit of this is we can also create a dynamic material instance to the player. So now to create a dynamic material instance, we're going to go into our material instance. We need something to change. We need a blueprint of some kind. We have these cubes in the main level, which would work pretty well. So we're just going to use them to save some time, and then we'll do another example afterwards. So I'm going to open up this blueprint since we've already got it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the static mesh. The reason we're going to take a look at the static mesh is because I want to explain the element 0. So when it comes to different static meshes, you might have multiple elements, and it will depend which element you want to create the dynamic material for. So on begin play, what we're going to do is we're going to actually get a reference to our static mesh, and we're going to get material, and you can see here that we can choose the element index. This element index links to the element 0. So right now, element 0 is 0, so this is the material we're changing. However, if you have something with multiple, you will need to change the number here to match the element that you want. So let's say instead of having a material shader like we do here for the cube, the gray area was a separate element, you would have that set to element 1 if that was the part you want to change. So from this, what we're going to do is we're going to drag off into create dynamic material. So you can see here we've got create dynamic material instance, and then we actually have 2 of them. So what's the difference? Create dynamic material instance for specified element index, optionally from the supplied material, exactly what we're doing here. Create a dynamic material instance which you can modify during gameplay. So this is the one that we're going to be after. So we want to create one that we can modify during gameplay. Event begin play is going to plug straight into our create dynamic material instance. So when our level starts, it's going to create a new material instance for us, and then we're just going to promote this to a variable. So optional name, we can name this to instance underscore, and then what we want to do is we want to set the material. So we get the cube, we set material, and now we plug in our dynamic material instance directly to that. So what we want to do is make sure the element index here matches element index 0. And right now, our material that is on our cube isn't really set up to be a dynamic material instance, although I'm pretty sure it does have parameters we can change. So we could actually use this one and then change some of this information here, which might be better to do. So the reason I'm going to do that is because it's got more options for us to play with. However, it is the exact same. If I wanted to use this material, all I would have to do is go to the cube and set the default material to m_dynamic material. And then it's going to create that for us. So we would only have access to the color parameter. Whereas because this has a material which already has parameters set up for us, which we can see if we open this up, like so, what we can do is we can just use those variables which already exist for us. So now we can actually tell it to do something. So we need to figure out what we want it to do. So maybe we could do an event, and then we could have this set to change color. So in the level, if we compile, we have the yellow outside. We could probably do that so it actually changes for us. So change color, we're just going to do off the end of the begin play, change color. So the logic happens, event begin play, we get our static mesh, and then we get the material which it has on that element 0. We then create a dynamic material instance, which we're just giving a little name. And then we store a reference to the dynamic material instance, so we can then change it. And then we have the set material. So we're setting the material on the cube to our dynamic material instance. A little bit of a loop, but then we then activate change color, so any logic that happens after this can use the logic up here for the set the material instance. And now we need a way to actually update the mesh. Update the material to something different. So in this case, what we could do is we could maybe do a timer. So timeline, and we say from start, we want to then run through a different variable. So then we can actually do the intensity changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in the dynamic material instance that we have here, and we can do get. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I can show you what variables we can do. And you can actually do a set. And you'll see here that we have a bunch of different options. So these are going to link directly to the material instance that we have, or the master material. So in our case, you've got options like set material, set overlay material. That's just static mesh stuff, so we don't want to do that. But you also have set scalar parameters by index, set scalar parameter by value, and then set texture parameter and vector parameter. So set vector is going to be anything that uses 3 values. So let's say a color. You would probably use a set vector parameter for that. And then a scalar parameter by value is going to be a 1-digit variable. So if we take a look at the material instance cube, you can see here that we have a rough max and a rough min. Those would be a scalar, so scalar parameter, so set scalar parameter. And then you would have the colors would be set vector parameter because they are 3. They're created of 3 numbers, 4 in this case. So you would change those that way. So if we do set, let's do vector because it's going to be our color. So set vector parameter value. And you can see here it actually gives us a color that we could choose from. So in our case, we want to maybe get the color, get vector parameter value. So we can get that here. And then we can look for this specific parameter. And in this case, it's called glow color. So that's the exterior. So if we change this in here, it's going to change it to a different color. And then when I save it and we load the level, we'll actually see that it's changed those cubes to match. So we're going to take that name. So that name is glow color. And then we're going to put that into here. So check spelling. Yep. And now we're actually getting the original color, which we can then create a variable of. So promote a variable, original, and we could have this happen maybe at the beginning. So we saw a reference to it. So let's plug this in like so. And then we could say play from start. So now afterwards, we want to have the variable that we're going to go for. So this is the variable we'll be changing to. So I'm going to create a new duplicate from our original. And then let's call this next color. Not sure what else to call it, but we can drag that in. So we can get the original and we can get the next color. And now we can actually lerp from these to set this. So lerp linear color. So then we've got our next color. So start at A and then we go through to B and we plug that into our value. So every time this timeline updates, it's going to set the vector parameter, but we need an alpha to go through it. So what we could do is we could change this time to 2, so it's a little bit smaller, and then do a track. So add float value. So we only need a float because in our event graph, we're only accepting a float through our alpha. So then we could say, okay, it's going to start at 0, and then we're going to right click and add a key, set this to 0, and then we'll right click, add another key. We're going to set this to a value of 1, and then it would be 2. So length is going to take 2 seconds, and then it's going to go to a value of 1. Because in our event graph, this alpha is going to just change between 0 and 1. So we can now plug that in like so. And now if we press compile and save, nothing's going to happen because we didn't change our next color. It's the same as our original. So what we can do is we can say, okay, we're going to take it to a blue. So that way, when we have our original material color, if I set this back to yellow, should be yellow. There we go. And then we press play. So I'm just going to simulate in viewport. We should be able to see that change over time, if I've done it correctly. So it's not happening because I didn't change the parameter name. So the parameter name that we want to change is going to be glow color. So I need to make sure that is set here. So, okay, this is the one we're changing. Pane. So now, hopefully when we press play, it should actually change. So we can see that lerp between those values. So you can imagine if you're having this, so when you grab the cube, it then changes the color. You could do it that way. And then you can say on finished, maybe reverse. It's not going to let me do it. Do a custom event, call it reverse. So we can say reverse from end. See how this would handle. I'm not actually sure if this will handle it very well. It might just play it once. Then we go through, goes to light green, blue, and then it kind of loops. So there is a snapping, so it is going forward and then back, but then it snaps. But you can kind of see how we can change the variables from that. So what we're doing is we're creating a dynamic material instance from the material already on our mesh, and then we're setting that material instance to the static mesh. From there, we're just saying change color, where we get the vector parameter value, in this case our color, and we're passing that through to the original material color, or we're getting a reference to it. From there, we play from start, and then we actually finish up, we update over time and learn between these variables. I'm going to remove this reverse, because we don't really need it for this example. And that's how you can actually set it up to have it so when you use a dynamic material instance, it will change variables. And it's a super easy way of doing it. But now what I'm going to show you another way of doing it. Pretty much the exact same, but we'll do a little bit more custom. And we're going to do it inside the player. Actually delete this now. I'm just creating, let's call this play damage. And then I'm going to go in and I'm just going to set up a very simple shader. So we can actually have a kind of sphere radius around the player's camera. So if we take damage, we can actually fade that in and then fade it back out. Just to show you a different way of actually using this. Okay, so I'm back. It's a simple shader to act as like a damage effect. So it kind of squeezes into the screen and then away from it. So if I actually have this radius variable, I can actually change this to kind of horn that in. So if I go to a material instance that I created of this master material, you can see I can expose the radius variable and I can actually just kind of shrink that in. So the more damage you take, the closer it actually closes up. And all it is a simple shader that uses a sphere gradient. So if I start previewing this, you can see that I have two power nodes, so I get different effects out of that. So a lower value gives me a softer edge. So actually, probably going to be, do about 5. You see it actually softens it up even more. And then 20 acts as like a very soft edge, so it fades further in. And then I use the noise. So in the noise, a simple noise out of Unreal, I lerp those together onto each other. And that gives me this effect here, which I can then actually modify and then add together. So I add the high intensity with the low intensity, gives me this effect. And then what I can do is I can invert that mask. So I get this, sort of like a reticule, which I plug into opacity. And then I just have my base color, which feeds in based on the gradients. So if I go to here, I could actually change this. Probably do, if I try this, you see I get different effects. We don't need the darker one. It would actually be fine. I'm trying to figure out which one would be a good distance. Do it that way, actually, and then that will give us a higher fall off. So if I save this, like it is, it's just about playing around with your shaders and then going from there. But if we undo it, you can see that we got a dark effect. I could then go in here and then change this to be like a blue, and we get this cool, awesome effect, nebular effect, call it. But we can actually have this dark. So once it's on the player, it's going to look a little bit better. And then we'll do a extremely dark red, so it fades into the center. And in this case, because we're only changing the radius, we're just going to bring this into the screen. We only actually have to expose this variable here. So we can actually have it go out. And then that's why we've only got the radius up here on the left. So as it comes in, kind of fades in, and then you can have it go as far as you want. You'd probably have it capped out at probably about 0.5 or 0.4, but we can see that, and then we can go from there. So in our player, if we want to use this, we can open up VR Horn, we can get our viewport, we can find our camera, and we can place a plane, search for m_player damage. So I've got a material instance, but we're just going to use the m_player damage. And you can see here that we've got that in the scene. Actually, I will use the material instance version, because then I can actually control it a little bit easier just to start out. So 0.7. It could be pretty high actually. We could just put this up to 1 so we can't see it. But when we press play and we jump in, we don't see the material, or at least we shouldn't be able to once I'm in the scene. However, if I take that material instance and I bring it down and then we press play, we should still see it if I've set it up correctly. As a child of the camera, it might be too close or just not at all. So the reason it wasn't showing up is because the plane has collision, so it's overlapping with the world, and then it's kind of just breaking it. So I'm going to set this to no collision, so it spawns in, and then I can move this closer to the camera. So now if I delete the one that I put into the level for testing, what I can do is I can actually open it up, we can jump in, and I can actually see the effect as it's on the screen. So there is some areas where I could just move it closer. We don't want to go too close, otherwise we'll start clipping the camera. But I've got it in there, and then we can actually see it. So what I'm going to do is, rather than setting up a damage system, because this video is already getting on in length, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, I'm going to scale it up slightly, and then set this variable to 1 so we can't actually see it. There will be some overdraw because it's a translucent material. You could go in there and set this to hidden once it equals 1 or 0, but I'm just doing this for a little bit of fun, so I thought I'd show you how to do it. Cool. So on begin play, we're just going to do the exact same thing. We're going to get our plane, and we're going to get material, so kind of covering up what we're already doing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create dynamic material instance, and we'll do this at runtime. So create material instance during gameplay. Plug this in like so. And we'll say material dynamic material instance underscore damage, and then we'll right click promote to a variable. So we've got that stored. So damage material, and then we set the material. So we go to plane, set material, plug that in like so with our object going to material. We only have one element on our plane, so it's only be element index 0. So the set, and then we have. So now we need a way to just actually push that to the screen. So it's essentially just repeating what I did earlier, but with a cool shader effect. What we're going to do is we're going to hit compile, and then we're going to get our damage material, and we're going to say what would be a good way of doing it. So we would probably have this set up to our health system. So we could say so event take damage, and then we could actually set a variable. So we could set texture parameter value. So we looked at doing the color earlier. So now we'll do the texture parameter value. So we can bring this in. Oh, so earlier on we did the vector parameter, but we're going to use a scalar now because we're only changing the one value. So we can just search for scalar or set scalar parameter value. And the parameter value that we're going to change in our material is called radius. And we can actually set that here. So in this case, you could imagine that you're taking damage, you're going to have a health float. So what we're doing, it's going to be health, and then we're going to have this as a float type. This will be public. We take this, we could get it, and we could say, okay, we're going to look float. So look float, our value. You might have to do some stuff because it wouldn't typically go from 0 to 1, but we could say our B value. I think it's going to be that way around, and then we could climb it at 0.3, let's say. So we can plug this in like so. So now when we take damage, it's going to update our system, and our damage is just going to be a variable as well. And it's just we're just going to do a timeline, keep it super simple because we do not have time to set up a full system. So play from start, and we can play it, and then update the damage. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have this one set the same way. So track float variable 1. I don't know why I didn't change. 1 length 1 add key 1. So now in the event graph we can actually set that health variable. So I get set to update. We'll do the update health before we take damage because that's why we would normally do it. And then plug that in like so. So now when we start, what we'll do is we'll delay by 2 seconds just to see which end of the spectrum it's on. And then when we press start, we should wait 2 seconds. And then you can see it actually fades in really fast. So that is the problem. Finished. We'll set the health value to 0. Update so it stops. Sets that. And then the length. Just so we can actually see it, we might have to increase this to about 5. Normally you would have your variable change over time when you take damage, so it would increment anyway. But because we don't have that system, it's just a bit easier to set this up this way. Wait 2 seconds. Kind of just starts. It's a bit crazy. So I've messed probably this up. Trying to wait 10 seconds to see if it comes through. Nothing happened. Okay, so I've done a little bit of playing around. Same thing, I've just got the time and then I've just played around with alert values to get something nice. And I'm pretty happy with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in. We'll take a look. I want to show you what it currently looks like. So with it placed in front of the player, so as we're in the headset, it'll slowly fade in as we take damage over time. So you can see it actually goes around. And because it's wall space on the noise, it actually updates on the edges. You can't see it on the right hand side, but in the headset it covers my whole view. There's like a little tunnel window to see out of. So then I could fade that back out when I take health or something along those lines. The problem right now though is it appears in front of our hands. So if I move up, our hands don't look like they've got blood on them, or as the material is part of our eyes. So what we can do is we can go to M player damage. Can we search for depth and then disable depth test. So as soon as we do this, we can press start. And then now what will happen is when we jump into our project and we actually start, we can then move around, we slowly start taking damage, and it actually appears as though it's in front of our hands, so on our eyes in the scene. So you can play around with it quite a bit, do what you want. It's just a cool, fun little effect to cover dynamic material instances, and then also a damage screen. So what I might do is actually split this video, keep it all in one, but upload it twice with two different names, bit edited, so you can actually do the damage one by itself, and then go from there. But if you want to get access to the files, Patreon and YouTube members will be able to download this project once the video goes live. And then you can check this out. It is built in 5.4.4. So as long as you've got that version, you can build it there, or you can build it in any version of Unreal. All the logic I've done is through 4.2 below that with the first Unreal Engine. So keep that in mind. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to support the channel and see more cool videos like this, more in-depth ones like this, make sure to head over to Patreon and YouTube members. Special thanks to everyone over there. I've got some new videos coming out soon. I've got a sponsor sending out a piece of hardware that I'm super excited to play around with, which I asked them for. So we've got that coming, and then we can go from there. But yeah, alright, see you in the Discord, see you on Patreon, see you on YouTube members.